Thinking positively doesn't raise your vibration. If you hide your fear behind pretty affirmations, you are not expanding your consciousness. You're just decorating your prison. Operating at a high vibration means something much more uncomfortable. It means observing the identity you've built, discovering how it distorts your reality, and daring to let it die. When the observer changes, the experience they can create also changes. Then paths begin to appear that you didn't recognize before. Not because you convinced the universe to reward you, but because you stopped looking at life through the same wound. And when that wound stops making decisions for you, many things finally start to go well.
There are people who enter a state where everything seems to conspire in their favor. They arrive at the right moment. They recognize opportunities that no one else sees. They meet the right people. And when something goes wrong, even that failure ends up leading them to something better. Most people call it luck. Others say they're operating at a high vibration. But Jacobo Grinberg investigated a much stranger explanation. The reality we experience could depend on the interaction between our neural field and a fundamental structure of space. And what if raising your consciousness actually changes the reality you can access? In this video, you'll discover 5 steps to test it for yourself. The last one is the most important, because there's a part of you that might be blocking the life you want in order to preserve the person you think you are. First step, stop confusing your interpretation with reality. Imagine you send an important message and the other person doesn't respond. During the first hour, you think she's probably busy. 2 hours later, you start to suspect that something is going on. After 4 hours, your mind has already written a whole trilogy about rejection, betrayal, and abandonment. All that's left is for Netflix to buy the rights. But the event is still the same. You still haven't received a response. Everything else was built within your experience. This happens constantly. Someone gives you a serious look and you assume they dislike you. You make a mistake and decide you'll never succeed. An opportunity doesn't work out and you take it as proof that life is against you. Your brain receives incomplete information and uses memories, emotions, and expectations to fill in the gaps. The problem isn't that it interprets. Interpreting is one of its functions. The problem arises when you forget that it's doing it. Jacobo Grinberg devoted much of his work to investigating how brain activity is transformed into conscious experience. Within the synergic theory, he proposed that the brain generates a neuronal field that interacts with a fundamental structure of space, which he called the lattice theory. From that interaction, the reality we experience would emerge. This proposal remains a controversial theory. It has not been accepted as a proven scientific explanation of consciousness. But its central question is extraordinarily powerful. If experience depends on the interaction between the world and the organization of the observer, how much of what you call reality comes from what happened, and how much to the way your consciousness processed it? When you are vibrating low, in the sense we'll use here, your perception becomes narrow, reactive, and repetitive. Fear finds threats. Guilt finds punishments. Insecurity finds rejections. Anger finds enemies. Not because everything is imaginary, but because each state selects and organizes information in a different way. When you're scared, even a small noise can seem like a sign of danger. When you're calm, the same noise barely gets any attention. The outside world didn't change. What changed was the organization from which you perceived it. That's why the first way to elevate your state is to separate 3 elements: what happened, what you interpreted, and what you decided to do with that interpretation. Let's suppose you weren't chosen for a job. Let's suppose what happened is that the company selected someone else. Your interpretation could be, I don't have talent, and I'm never going to make it. Your reaction could be to give up, but you could also take it to mean that you need to improve a skill, look for another type of position, or ask what was missing in your application. Responsibility doesn't mean claiming that everything that happened is your fault. It means regaining your ability to respond. Guilt locks you in the past. Responsibility opens up a possibility in the present. Every time something upsets you, use this question. What do I really know? And what is my mind adding? It seems simple, but it can spare you arguments, impulsive decisions, and about 80% of the messages that start with, "We need to talk." The more clearly you distinguish the fact from the interpretation, the less energy you spend fighting against realities that may only exist within your own story. Raising your vibration starts there, seeing with greater clarity. Second step, change your state before making decisions. There is a reason why some people repeat the same problem, even if they change cities, jobs, or partners. They change the setting, but keep the observer. And the observer goes on to build a similar experience with different characters. The person who fears being abandoned may interpret any distance as rejection. The person who is convinced that they must prove their worth turns every opportunity into a test. The person who associates love with suffering may get bored when they find a peaceful relationship. Then they say there was no chemistry, because admitting there was no chaos sounds less romantic. If you want things to start going well for you, it's not enough to just do more. You need to observe the state you're acting from. A decision made out of fear seeks immediate relief. A decision made from clarity can withstand temporary discomfort because it recognizes a greater consequence. From desperation, you accept any opportunity. From clarity, you accept. You distinguish between a door and a trap disguised as a door. Out of scarcity, you chase. From clarity, you participate without abandoning your dignity. This is where one of the most interesting practices studied by Grinberg comes in: meditation. For him, meditation was not just a relaxation technique. It could modify the organization of experience, reduce internal noise, and allow a different relationship with the observer. In his approach to self-referential meditation, attention is directed toward the very act of observing. It's not just about contemplating the breath, an image, or a sound. It's about recognizing that which is aware of all those contents. You can practice it in a simple way. Sit for a few minutes without trying to achieve anything extraordinary. Listen to the sounds. Observe the sensations in your body. Allow thoughts to arise. Then recognize that all those contents are being observed. You don't need to answer who is observing. As soon as your mind says, the observer is me, born in a certain place, with a certain life story and a certain zodiac sign, it has already given you a description again. Observe that description as well. The goal is not to leave the mind completely empty. If you expect no thoughts to appear, your first thought will probably be wondering why thoughts keep appearing. The practice is about no longer obeying them automatically. When the thought, "everything will go wrong," arises, you recognize it as a mental content. When it appears, "I'm not enough," you observe that it's just a phrase within consciousness, not a verdict issued by the Supreme Court of reality. That separation changes your state. Only then do you return to the problem. Ask yourself, if I weren't acting out of fear, what would I see? If I didn't need to prove anything, what would I choose? What decision would honor the person I want to become? Having a high vibration doesn't mean feeling joy all day long. That's not enlightenment. It's suspicious. It means that one emotion doesn't completely rule your field of perception. You can feel fear and act with courage. You can experience sadness without making it your identity. You can be angry without burning down a relationship that took you years to build. When you regulate your state before making a decision, a lot of things start to go well because you stop letting your most impulsive 5 minutes take the wheel. Third step. Build coherence between what you think, feel, and do. Many people say they want one kind of life, but every day they build another. They say they want peace, but they feed conflicts. They want health, but they treat rest as if it were a crime. They want a healthy relationship, but they're still available for someone who only shows up at 2 a.m. with a, "Are you awake?" They want prosperity, but they avoid learning, negotiating, selling, or exposing themselves to rejection. Then they try to resolve that contradiction by thinking more intensely about the outcome. But consciousness is not organized only by desires. It is also organized through repeated actions. Within the synergic theory, Grinberg used the concept of synergy to talk about the degree of coherence, organization, and a neural field's capacity to incorporate information. Without turning his model into a proven formula for achieving goals, this idea allows us to understand something practical. The more fragmented your system is, the more confusing your experience becomes. One part wants to move forward, another is afraid of losing security. One wants to be seen, another hides. One asks for love, another rejects anyone who gets too close. Raising your vibration doesn't mean eliminating those contradictions by pretending they don't exist. It means integrating them. Imagine you want to start a project. Instead of just repeating, "I'm going to succeed," recognize the whole system involved in what you want to achieve, what fear appears, what real price you are willing to pay, and what habits support that goal. What part of you resists if you ignore it? The resistance? It will act from the shadows. If you observe it, you can negotiate with it and devise a realistic course of action. Maybe you don't need to feel completely safe to start. You need to show your system through small actions that it can move forward without being destroyed. Coherence is built when your words, decisions, and habits stop constantly contradicting each other. If you claim to respect yourself, set a boundary. If you say you want to learn, study even when no one is watching. If you want an opportunity, develop the necessary ability to sustain it. If you want peace, stop mentally revisiting every night people you stopped talking to 5 years ago. The brain learns more from what you repeat than from what you promise. Every consistent action reduces the distance between the identity you imagine and the identity you practice. And here, being before having takes on a less magical meaning. It doesn't mean acting like a millionaire by buying things you can't afford. That technique mainly increases your debt. It means starting to embody the qualities necessary to create the outcome. If you want confidence, keep small promises to yourself. If you want abundance, learn to generate value, manage resources, and recognize opportunities. If you want a stable relationship, practice honesty, boundaries, and reciprocity before demanding them. The result won't come by itself, but you will stop acting like someone incapable of receiving or sustaining it. That is how you increase coherence. Fourth step, take care of the field that is shaping your perception. Every day you allow hundreds of voices to enter your consciousness. Videos, news, conversations, comments, comparisons. People who believe that everything is impossible, and others who claim you can manifest a Ferrari before Friday if you visualize with enough enthusiasm. Everything you pay attention to trains your perception. If you consume conflict for hours, your brain learns to find conflict. If you constantly compare yourself, it learns to interpret life as a competition. If you expose yourself to people who ridicule any attempt to grow, you'll start censoring yourself before acting. You don't need to believe in an invisible energy transmission to recognize it. Emotional states, expectations, and behaviors are spread through language, imitation, and social interaction. Grinberg also explored the possibility of deeper interactions between neural fields. Some of his experiments looked for correlations in separate people, but they do not allow us to claim as fact that remote mental communication exists. The hypothesis is still being discussed, but in everyday life there is something much more evident. The people you live with change what you consider normal. If everyone around you makes fun of those who try something new, you'll hide your projects. If you surround yourself with people who take responsibility, you'll learn to look for solutions. If you live with constant drama, calmness might start to seem boring to you. That's why raising your awareness also requires you to select the informational environment that feeds it. Ask yourself, how do I feel after talking to this person? What version of myself shows up when I stay in this environment? Does the content I consume help me understand, or does it just keep me reacting? It's not about kicking anyone out of your life just because they're having a bad day. You also don't need to form a cult of smiling people who respond with gratitude when the kitchen is on fire. It's about recognizing patterns. Some people can point out a mistake without belittling you. Others turn every dream into an autopsy. There is content that broadens your thinking. Others hijack your attention and send you back into the world angry at strangers. Your context is not just the physical place where you live. It's also what you allow to occupy your mind. You can live in a limited environment and expose yourself to books, conversations, and knowledge that expand your possibilities. But there's a catch. Consuming teachings is not the same as transforming yourself. You can watch 50 videos about consciousness and still react the same way when someone doesn't reply to your message. Information only turns into growth when it changes the way you observe or act. That's why you need silence. If you fill every moment with stimuli, you'll never discover which thoughts are yours and which are echoes of the last thing you consumed. Walk without your phone. Eat without looking at a screen. Listen to a conversation without preparing your response while the other person is speaking. Notice how hard it is to remain completely present. When you regain your attention, you regain psychological energy, and a less fragmented awareness notices details that previously went unnoticed. Sometimes what we call good luck is simply attention available at the right moment. Fifth step. Stop benefiting from what you want to change. This step may explain why, despite your efforts, certain areas of your life never seem to improve. Every persistent problem has a cost, but some also produce a hidden benefit. Failing can save you from responsibility. Not finding a partner can protect you from intimacy. Staying angry can keep you from feeling sadness. Saying that no one helps you can allow you not to ask for help directly. Procrastinating on a project preserves the fantasy that it would have been perfect. As long as you don't finish it, no one can judge it. A brilliant strategy, except for the small detail that it can't work either. This doesn't mean that you consciously chose your losses, illnesses, or difficult circumstances. Not everything bad that happens was attracted by your vibration. That idea, besides being simplistic, can turn spirituality into a machine that blames those who suffer. The question is different. What behaviors, interpretations, or identities are you holding on to because they offer you protection? Jacobo Grinberg talked within his model about coding errors that would limit the system's ability to decode certain information. We can carefully use that idea as a way to understand our filters. If your identity is built around "nobody values me," you will pay extraordinary attention to any gesture of indifference. However, you might minimize recognition because it contradicts your story. If you believe that money corrupts, you might consciously desire prosperity while sabotaging every opportunity that brings you closer to it. If you associate love with abandonment, you might feel an intense attraction to inaccessible people and distrust those who are truly there for you. That's why some people win an argument and lose a relationship. The ego celebrates victory instead of discovering an unknown reality. That's why some people win one and lose a relationship. The ego celebrates victory while gathering its things. That she gives you. If you associate love with abandonment, you might minimize the recognition that brings you closer to it. Now choose a recurring problem and ask yourself, what does it allow me to avoid? What attention, protection, or excuse do I get from it? What responsibility would appear if it were resolved? Who would I have to stop being? What aspect of success scares me? You might discover that you want money, but you're afraid of the responsibility of managing it. You want to be visible, but you're afraid of criticism. You want a partner, but you don't want to give up absolute independence. You want to change, but you also want no one to expect anything different from you. That contradiction doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a human being with a system that's trying to protect itself. Transformation begins when you can observe that protective response without obeying it. Here, the position of the observer becomes essential. You don't attack the part that is afraid. You acknowledge it. You understand what it's trying to avoid. And then you choose an action that shows it no longer needs to rule your whole life. Sometimes you'll need professional help. A qualified therapist can show you patterns that seem completely normal from the inside. The eye can see almost everything except itself without a mirror. And our mind is similar, although it is usually much more convinced that it has it. Now the 5 keys come together. First, you stop confusing your interpretations with facts. Then, you shift your state before deciding. You build coherence between what you desire and what you practice. You shield your attention from the information field that distorts your perception. And finally, you give up the hidden benefit that keeps the problem alive. That's what it means to vibrate at a higher level from a deeper perspective. Not floating above conflicts. Not denying the pain. Not smiling while everything falls apart. Vibrating at a higher level means increasing the clarity of your perception, the coherence of your actions, and the breadth of perspective from which you respond. Does this guarantee that you will never lose, make mistakes, or suffer again? No. Something that, from the outside, looks a lot like everything is going well for you. You stop insisting on closed doors, and you spot the open ones sooner. You recognize a destructive relationship in time. You notice an opportunity that mental noise would have hidden. You take a bad experience and turn it into information. When something fails, you correct your course without turning failure into your identity. And when a good opportunity comes up, you no longer sabotage it because you feel you don't deserve it. The syntergic theory tried to explain experience as the result of an interaction between the neural field and the lattice. His most extraordinary claims remain hypotheses and should be treated as such. But Grinberg left a question that can transform your relationship with life. How much of what you call reality is conditioned by the structure from which you observe? Maybe you can't order the universe to make everything turn out the way you want. Fortunately, the universe doesn't work like a delivery app. But you can stop living from a state of consciousness that interprets every change as a threat, every difficulty as a punishment, and every opportunity as something reserved for others. You can observe before reacting, regulate yourself before deciding, act in alignment, take care of what enters your mind, and let go of the identity that needed to repeat the same fate. Then something strange happens. You can't manage to control all of life, but you start to encounter it in a completely different way. Problems are no longer always enemies. Rejections can become direction. Mistakes turn into information. Opportunities no longer pass by a mind that's too busy reliving the past. Maybe that's what it means to operate at a higher level of consciousness. Not getting the world to obey all your wishes, but rather raising your awareness so you can recognize, hold, and take advantage of what was previously invisible to you. And when the observer changes, often life doesn't need to change as much as you thought for everything to finally start going well.